We're broadcasting from 240 feet below snow level. If you can hear this through the static, congratulations. You're either lucky or you're insane, or maybe a little bit of both. Up here, the world has gone entirely sideways. Snow covers everything. Cities swallowed under frozen waves. Streets cracked open like the earth itself is trying to vomit us out. But down here, we have our little kingdom of frost and steel, and we cling to it with teeth and nails. The tunnels smell like mold, rust, and something metallic that no one wants to admit might be old blood. The generator coughs in the corner, a low, rattling groan that keeps our lights alive just enough for us to stumble around without breaking an ankle on jagged concrete. I adjust the mic. My fingers numb, even through thick gloves. The warmth isn't just cold, it's a constant ache in your bones, gnawing at your patience and sense of reality. Above us, the wind hammers the steel, screaming like 1,000 souls trapped in the storm. You can't imagine it unless you've been up there, standing on the edge of a collapsed city, watching the world vanish under a blizzard the size of a skyscraper. The snow isn't gentle. It's a predator, relentless, silent, and indifferent. And somewhere in it, the dead still shuffle. Juno paces behind me, her boots clanging against metal grates. She's the kind of person who moves like she's expecting the ceiling to cave in at any second, which, in fairness, it might. Her scarf is wrapped so tightly around her face that only her eyes are visible, wide and alert. We should check the upper tunnels again, she mutters, almost to herself. Something's not right. The vibrations, I can feel them through the walls. Or you're imagining ghosts, I reply, and she shoots me a look sharp enough to cut through steel. Her instincts have saved us more times than I care to count, and I know better than to argue. The vibrations are real. They always are. Snow shifts, walls buckle, metal groans. Down here, the world is less forgiving than above. Above, it's death by storm. Below, it's death by misstep. We've carved out a semblance of civilization in these tunnels. Corridors lined with scavenged steel panels, racks of canned beans and powdered milk stacked like fragile monuments, and old generators that wheeze and clank like they're auditioning for a horror film. Every corner smells of damp, oil, and the faint stench of desperation. And yes, sometimes fear. Fear has a taste, like copper on your tongue mixed with the bitter tang of burned insulation. It lingers, and there's no shaking it. Toby is sitting on a crate, feet propped on the edge, spinning a wrench like it's a toy. His grin is a little manic, a little tired. You know, he says, voice echoing off the walls, I always thought I'd be famous for something glamorous. Instead, here I am, counting cans and listening to static with a bunch of freaks. Humor, dark and brittle, is our currency. Without it, the walls close in faster than the snow ever could. Laughter isn't optional. It's survival. The snow outside doesn't just block roads or crush buildings. It buries memory. Every landmark is gone under a white tide, replaced with monotonous white and the occasional skeleton of a city. Streets twist into ice rivers. Skyscrapers lean like drunk giants. Windows like dark eyes staring into the void. From up here, the undead wander blindly, drawn by sound, scent, or whatever fragmented instinct remains. They're not human anymore, not really. They're reminders of what's left behind. Down here, we rely on old tech to survive. Water is melted from ice, filtered through a jury-rigged system that leaks half the time. Heat comes from generators on borrowed fumes, and light from bulbs that flicker and threaten to die at any moment. Every day is a negotiation with entropy, And food. Food is a constant worry. Cans, dried goods, the occasional scavenged protein bar. We ration like monks counting prayers. Every meal is a reminder that life is both precious and absurd. I switch the frequency to check the old emergency network. Static, noise, a faint garble like someone far away trying to talk but being drowned by the storm. Signals are fragile. Communication is as risky as crossing a collapsed street above. And yet we listen, because sometimes in the static, hope hides. Maybe it's another survivor group. Maybe it's nothing. But the chance, however small, is all we have. Juno bends over the radio, squinting. "There," she whispers. "A pattern. Someone's trying to broadcast. Could be." She stops, frowning. Could be what? A trap? Another group desperate enough to fight for what little we have? Or maybe someone sane. The tunnels themselves are precarious. Each step on the graded floors sends a shiver up your spine. Rust weakens everything. Old steel groans under the weight of ice. The walls shift sometimes, almost imperceptibly, reminding us that the mountain above is alive and indifferent. There's a rhythm to it, like a heartbeat. Only this heartbeat doesn't care if you survive. And survival is rarely graceful. I remember the first day we came down here. The world above was already gone, white and endless. We slipped into the tunnels like refugees, terrified, carrying whatever we could salvage. The generators we found were old, rattling machines that hadn't seen proper maintenance in decades. We patched them with whatever we could find, duct tape, wire, and prayers. They've been humming ever since, stubbornly, like a reminder that life refuses to quit. Every night is the same. We huddle around the heat source, ration our meals, and tell stories that no one will remember because the world outside will probably erase them anyway. Toby tells jokes that make no sense. Juno recounts absurd pre-apocalypse memories. And I sit here, speaking into a radio that might never reach anyone. Still, we do it. Because the act of speaking, of being heard, is an anchor in a world gone mad. Sometimes the snow above shakes the tunnels violently. Dust and small rocks fall from the ceiling. We freeze, knowing that even a few seconds of hesitation could mean being buried alive. And we move again, each step deliberate, each decision a gamble. We've learned to trust instincts over planning. Plans are fragile. Instincts are primal. Food shortages have started to gnaw at us like rodents. Rationing is precise. Too much for one, not enough for another. Tensions rise silently. We avoid arguments, but the air is thick with unspoken grievances. When one of us coughs too hard or spills a few precious drops of water, eyes flicker, hearts race. The line between civility and chaos is thinner than a sheet of ice. Above us, somewhere, the undead shuffle, moan and bite at anything that moves. The snow muffles their sounds, but it cannot hide them completely. Once, a section of the tunnel echoed with a shriek. Human, alive, panicked. We ran. We never found them. And every time the static in the radio flares up, part of me wonders if it's them calling, or someone else, or something worse. Tunnels become our world, our prison, our sanctuary. They are claustrophobic and endless, twisting in ways that make maps almost useless. Every corridor smells of damp. Every corner hides a shadow, and every creak makes us jump. Yet, despite the danger, we press on, because the alternative is to stop, and stopping is a death sentence. We've set rules to survive, strange rules that seem ridiculous outside but are sacred down here. No heroics without backup, no touching what's dead, no wandering alone. The rules are our lifeline, the thin cord tying us to sanity, and we follow them, sometimes blindly, sometimes desperately, but always, always carefully. I can see Juno moving along the wall, testing it for cracks, listening to the vibrations. Toby is still spinning his wrench, eyes unfocused, muttering jokes no one else understands. And I sit here, breathing into a microphone, speaking to a world that may or may not exist, hoping someone, somewhere, hears us. Because even in the heart of the snow, underground, with the dead above and the storm outside, the act of telling the story keeps us alive. And for now, alive is all that matters. Every tunnel has a story. Every crack in the steel whispers secrets. And above all, the snow keeps coming, indifferent and endless. But down here, we cling, we survive, and we broadcast. For whoever is listening, know this: the world is gone, but we are not. Yet. And then the rumble starts, a low, ominous growl that shakes the floor beneath us. It's not the storm. Not entirely. Something else moves above, pressing down, testing our sanctuary. We glance at one another, silent. That's all it takes. No words. Survival is instinct, and instincts are screaming. We move toward the far tunnel, checking the barricades. Juno's eyes narrow. Toby mutters something about ghosts, and I tighten my gloves, my hands shaking. Not entirely from cold. The world outside is frozen. Inside, we're alive, but barely. And yet, we keep moving, because the rules say we do. And maybe, just maybe, they'll keep us alive long enough to see another day. The tunnels are getting tighter, or maybe it's just me. My boots scrape the frost-covered grating, echoing into the dark like a drumbeat of warning. Every step is deliberate. Every breath a frozen mist that lingers in front of my face. We're moving deeper toward the section Juno flagged earlier, the one where the vibrations have been strongest. I can feel them through the steel walls, low, insistent, like the growl of some massive, patient predator. We don't know what's causing it yet, but instinct says it's bad. Toby is lagging behind, spinning his wrench again, muttering under his breath. You know, in high school I thought surviving chemistry class was hard. Ha! Try surviving a snow apocalypse underground. He grins, a weak, nervous smile. Humor is a necessary armor, but I can hear the tremor beneath it. Even he's not immune. Juno's ahead, scanning the walls, running her gloved fingers along cracks and joints. This section isn't stable, she says quietly. We might be sitting on a weak point. One more tremor and it could collapse. Her eyes, sharp and alert, dart to the shadows. We need to mark the route. If we have to retreat, we can't get lost. I nod, tapping the wall with my fist. The vibrations echo back. My stomach twists. Being below a mountain of ice and snow is like sitting in the belly of a living beast. You feel it breathe, and it doesn't care if you survive. Supplies are low, and that's always the silent, gnawing terror beneath the obvious dangers. We ration carefully. 2 small packets of dried protein per day, a teaspoon of powdered milk, some stale crackers. Enough to keep hunger at bay, barely. One mistake, one indulgence, and someone goes to bed hungry, teeth chattering, stomach screaming. That's the reality. Hunger sharpens everything. Fear, anger, desperation. We come across a corner where the walls are damp. Rusted pipes drip water into a shallow puddle that freezes almost instantly. We could melt this for drinking, Juno suggests, kicking at the ice. But it's slow, and it'll take fuel. Fuel is more precious than water in these tunnels. Every drop counts. You burn too much, you freeze. You burn too little, you starve. It's a constant, exhausting balancing act. Toby crouches, examining the ice. "You know what this reminds me of?" he says. "Camping trips. Minus the zombies, minus the snow that wants to kill you, minus everything else. Yeah, real nostalgic." He laughs, though it's hollow. Humor is a weapon. It keeps despair at bay, even if just for a moment. Movement. I freeze. Something scrapes against the wall, ahead, a slow, deliberate, unnatural noise. Our breaths catch. Juno gestures for silence. The radio in my pack crackles softly, then dies, leaving us in a void of sound where the only noise is the rasp of our own fear. We round the corner slowly, backs to the wall. And there it is. A section of the tunnel partially collapsed, twisted steel and jagged concrete blocking half the corridor. The vibrations were from this. The wall above groans, tiny shards of frost and debris rattling down. We can't go back. We have to go forward. "Careful," Juno whispers. She's already moving toward a narrow gap in the debris. We'll have to squeeze through one at a time. I lead, careful to test each footstep. The metal grates give under pressure. Frost flakes off walls and sticks to gloves. Every scrape of rock against steel sends echoes through the tunnels. Behind me, Toby swears softly, and I know he's panicking a little. He always panics a little. Once through, the tension doesn't ease. The air smells different here, damp, stale, with a faint metallic tang. My throat tightens. Something has been here recently. I can't tell if it's the undead, or humans scavenging, or just the wind moving through the tunnels. Suspicion is constant. You can't ever trust silence. We find a small alcove to rest. Juno pulls out a map she's been updating, tracing lines with a finger stiff from the cold. "If we follow this route," she says, "we can reach the upper supply cache. But it's a gamble. There's a weak section halfway, and no one knows how deep the snow has pressed down above." We debate. Survival is always a gamble. Every choice a potential death sentence. Food versus safety. Risk versus security. No easy answers. Toby leans back against the wall, muttering, "I say we take the gamble. What's life if you don't risk dying spectacularly, right?" His attempt at humor earns a glare from Juno and a sigh from me. But he's not entirely wrong. Doing nothing guarantees slow starvation. Moving might kill us quickly, or maybe it saves us. That's the cruel calculus of survival. As we move again, I notice subtle changes in the air. It's colder here, thinner, sharper. Every breath is a sting in the lungs. Fingers and toes are numb despite layers of gloves and socks. Fatigue presses on us, heavier than any physical burden. Every muscle aches, every joint protests, and still we move. You learn to ignore it, or you die. Toby trips on a piece of rebar, swearing loudly. I grab his arm. "Careful, or you'll give the dead above an easy snack." He laughs weakly, but the color has drained from his face. Fear is a constant companion now, like a shadow that doesn't move, doesn't sleep, doesn't leave. It's silent but palpable, wrapping around the chest, making your own heartbeat sound like a drum of doom. We reach a junction where 3 tunnels intersect. The map says left, but the vibration is stronger to the right. Juno studies it, brow furrowed. "We follow the map," she says finally. "We can't afford to be reckless. Every wrong turn could trap us or collapse the tunnel. Rules first, always. Rules. They're fragile, yet sacred. No heroics without backup. Never touch the dead. Never wander alone. Ration carefully. Trust instincts over plans. Strange rules. Absurd in any other life. But down here, They're the difference between living another day and joining the mountains of frozen corpses above. We hear it then, the unmistakable shuffling, slow and methodical. Not the snow, not the storm, something alive or undead, moving. Our eyes meet. Everyone knows the protocol. Silence, assessment, plan. Toby whispers, "It's just one, right?" I shake my head. Don't assume. One can become many. One can become... I cut myself off. The rules say don't panic, but panic is hard to suppress when the first groan reaches your ears and echoes off the walls. We hide in a small niche, hearts hammering. The sound passes, and we wait, breath held, muscles rigid. Minutes stretch like hours. Finally, silence. For now. The cache isn't far, but it's perilous. We edge forward, the narrow passage forcing us to walk single file. Frost drips from the ceiling onto our heads, a slow, silent threat. Each step is a negotiation with gravity and chance. The tunnels twist, confusing, labyrinthine, designed to break the mind as much as the body. We reach a dead end, marked on Juno's map. Behind a pile of debris, the supply cache. Relief is brief, enough for a breath, a glance. It's a small wooden crate, weathered, crusted with ice. Inside, canned beans, some protein bars, a few energy drinks. Not enough for everyone for long, but it's life. Toby laughs softly, a sound of disbelief. Miracles do happen underground, huh? Juno doesn't respond immediately. She's scanning, checking the walls, the ceiling. We're not safe yet, she says. We take what we can carry and move, fast. If the vibration worsens, this tunnel could collapse at any second. The haul begins. We divide the supplies, careful to ration evenly. Well, as evenly as human nature allows. Hunger is sharp, unrelenting, a whisper that grows louder in the belly. Someone always complains. Someone always hoards. Someone always wonders if the other half is worth more than life itself. Movement back is slower. Fatigue weighs heavier. Shadows loom larger. The cold seeps deeper. Every step is measured. Every sound magnified. We've been underground for weeks, and it shows. Faces pale, eyes hollow, movements mechanical. Humor is scarce, but Toby attempts a weak joke about surviving chemistry class again. We laugh faintly. Survival requires these moments, however small, however fleeting. And then, rumble. Not the tunnel, not the storm, something else. Massive, heavy, deliberate. The ground shakes beneath us. Dust falls from the ceiling. Panic tugs at the edges of reason. We cling to the rules, our rituals, our careful motions. One misstep and the tunnels could collapse. One wrong sound and the dead, or the desperate living, could find us. We press on. Deeper, slower, careful. Every sense is alert, every instinct screaming. We've learned to listen to the tunnels, to the vibrations, to the shifts in the air. Survival is instinct, and instinct says move. By the time we reach a more secure section, exhaustion has set in like a physical weight. Bodies ache, minds fray, but we are alive. Alive and still moving. That's what counts. In the tunnels, there are no guarantees, no safety nets, only the moment and the next decision. Every choice carries consequence. Every shadow hides a threat. And somewhere above, beyond the snow, beyond the ruined cities, the undead shuffle. Humans still hunt each other. The storm continues, indifferent, relentless. We have our strange rules, our fragile order, and for now, they hold. But the world is always testing them, pushing us, bending us toward chaos. Because down here, survival isn't a promise. It's a challenge, and we have no choice but to meet it. We move because we have to. There's no poetry and hesitation underground, only consequences. The map says one thing, and the walls say another. Juno's fingers trace the ink lines as if she could coax certainty from paper. Her breath fogs in the blue light. Each exhale is a small betrayal to the heat we hoard. The cache was a bone thrown to us by a world with little appetite left. For a few hours after we hauled the crates, we eat like kings who remember how small the palace used to be. But that's a stupid luxury. The thinking part of the mind says ration, ration, ration. The animal part says feast now because tomorrow is a rumor. We lose half the crate to quick hands and faster hunger anyway, and no one sleeps well after. The injured arrive before dawn. At least it feels like dawn, a gray bruise of light beyond an upper grate somewhere, but time here is elastic. They come in limping, faces mashed with frost, two of them carrying a third who looks like someone tried to fold him into a different life. His name is Mace, though names here are less like IDs and more like talismans. We shout them to the room like prayer and see if the sound holds. He's bleeding slow and dark, a map of red on snow-white skin that makes everyone quiet in a way the tunnel never lets us be. He was found at a collapsed junction, some other group's territory, swinging a scavenged crowbar like a prayer. They say he fought for a crate and lost. A crate of food is worth more than a warrant back home. That's the currency now. Decision time is never democratic underground. It is a pressure test. The rules say take the injured in if you can, no matter the cost. Rule 5, the one no one really wrote, but everyone reads into the cracks. Compassion is a rule disguised as sanity. But you also remember that opening the door to strangers inevitably means a new set of rules and new hands that count cans differently. We do a quick inventory with the kind of speed that comes from habit. 2 blankets, 1 morphine ampule we found last week, 3 protein bars, a cough suppressant concocted from something that might be antifreeze, and enough bandaging to look presentable. Not ideal. Enough to start. Toby, who normally makes jokes like they're bandages for the heart, looks at Mace, then at the ration list, and says nothing for once. The silence is a heavy thing. Juno insists we help. What's the point of rules if they kill us for the sake of purity, she says, checking the wound like she's reading Braille on a map to somewhere safer. Her voice is steady, too steady, and I know that steadiness came from a funeral she refused to attend years ago when she was someone else. We bring him into the sleeping alcove and lay him on an old mattress that smells of memories and coal. He twitches in a way that reminds you he's still human, or at least yesterday human. For the first time in days, someone in the group admits fear out loud. Mara, the quiet one who always counts the screws in our toolkit, sits on the crate and whispers, "If it's infected, we can't afford it." A sentence like that is a scalpel. It cuts a trust into neat, dangerous slices. Infection is the shadow logic of this place. It's the thing that turns rules into math. 1 versus many. Hope versus survival. Someone else, Eli, who scavenged an entire church clock once and still hums with the memory, suggests a middle way. We quarantine him for 2 days, he says, pragmatism and mercy braided together. If he shows signs, we move him to the storage alcove and seal it. If not, we integrate. It's the sort of plan that sounds noble and terrible in equal measure. 2 days of quarantine means hands on the wound, means shared utensils, means breathing the same recycled air. 2 days can also be an eternity for a small group with a sputtering generator. We jury-rig a quarantine area, 2 sheets of salvaged tarp, an oil drum converted into a heating hood, and the infamous rule list taped to the barrier in case anyone forgot. It feels theatrical, but theater is all the authority small communities have left. Mace rests on the mattress with a face like a prayer folded wrong. He wakes occasionally, twitching with fever and naming cities that have been gone for months. Once he whispers, "They made it snow," and then goes back to sleep. The line bounces in the air like static, and none of us say anything because saying the impossible aloud makes it seem more true. Days fold into a rhythm of watch shifts and whispered prayers. We check him. We feed him when he's lucid. We guard the tarp like a throne. The generator coughs and sometimes dies, and each time someone trades sleep for fingers in the wiring. When Mara goes to the supply room to fetch extra bandages, Juno follows at a distance. That's not paranoia. Paranoia is a luxury. It's vigilance in the shape of footsteps. Tension grows teeth when rumors arrive. Word in the tunnels is like a virus, fast and crooked. Another group was seen near the old subway shaft, dragging something metallic and loud that echoes like storms. Some say it's a machine, some say it's a beast, some say it's both. The tale mutates with every retelling. It becomes a thing with teeth and a name. We call it the Harrower because we like names that tell stories. If the Harrower is a machine, then someone is trying to move mountains, or to shake them. If it's a beast, then the world is inventing new predators by sly necessity. Either way, it's pressure. Mace wakes with sweat on his brow and his face pale as canned milk. He opens his eyes like a man surfacing from a long fall, and for a moment they are ordinary people's eyes, frightened, confused, alive. He tries to speak and the words come out wrong. He points at his chest and whispers, "They told us to run the heaters, to run them full blast. They said the more heat, the less of it, less of the movement." He coughs and the sound is paper tearing. They said they were trying to stop it with warmth. It made the snow weird. It made them wrong. He laughs, a small, terrible sound. Then the snow started to listen. That sentence rearranges the tunnel like a shove. The idea that somebody, somewhere, was trying to fix the storm with heat. Industrial heaters, generators turned monstrous, brings cold in a different way. Geoengineering by desperation. The thought sits in our chests like a stone. Someone is fucking with the weather? Or worse, someone tried to and broke the world in the process. The map in Juno's hand seems suddenly naive, a child's drawing instead of a survival tool. Arguments swell. Mara wants to use the last of our spare fuel to test the upper vents, to see if a heat source could stabilize a collapse we worry is coming. She says it's a calculation. Spend fuel to prevent a collapse that will cost lives. Eli says it's gambling with oxygen. We have to keep heat for people to sleep. Toby says nothing but his hands tremble. Even jokes have a hard time finding their footing now. The group fracturing is a slow, ugly thing. It starts with tone and becomes fate. We split. Part of us goes to the vents with a jerry can and hope. Part of us stays to watch Mace and guard the cache. I go with the vent team because the radio demands it. Someone needs to know. Someone needs to speak if the worst comes. Walking toward the vent shaft feels like walking toward a wound. The path is narrow, and above our heads the mountain hums like an old engine. Each thud echoes through the metal like footsteps in a cathedral of cold. We reach the vent and find evidence. Scorched metal, soot like ash on a child's cheek, and a crudely installed burner that looks like a fistful of salvaged boilers welded and wired together. Someone built a heater big enough to roast a town, and pointed it at the mountain. The metal is warped, deformed by heat and stress. Someone thought they could warm the sky into behaving. Someone thought to bulldoze weather by brute force. Juno curses, a sharp sound that ricochets from wall to wall. They were trying to melt it, she says. They were trying to melt the snow. They thought they were rescuing themselves. They didn't understand how snow holds itself up. They built chimneys and blowers, but they heated the layers unevenly. The snow shifted. The pressure changed. That's why the collapses are happening. They destabilized the mountain. The realization lands like a slab. We are not actors in a cosmic accident. We are the messy consequence of human arrogance and panic. Someone, people before us, people nearby, tried to reroute disaster and made it worse. The harrower becomes less mythical and more mechanical in our minds. Rigs, blowers, mad heat, and men with wiring and bad intentions. It gives the tunnels, our sanctuary, a new enemy. Human error amplified. Back at the tarp, Mace's fever flares and his lips split. He cries out in the night for nothing anyone can hear, and the sound sets something in motion. A groan, far off, like a response. The harrowers echo through the tunnels now. Or is it the mountain settling because we poked it with fevered hands? The lines between cause and effect get dirty and collapse underfoot. When the tremor strikes, it is not gentle. A wall near the supply cache groans and a chunk of concrete gives. Dust like static fills the air. Someone screams. Short, high, human. We move with the speed of practiced people. Barricades, ropes, leverage, curses, and a prayer thrown like a cigarette. In the panic, Eli slips. His ankle gives on a piece of twisted metal and pain spreads like white fire. He bites the air, swearing, and I see the math in his face. The idea that one injured person can change the whole group's probability of survival. The rules that seemed like moral beacons become ledger entries. There's a choice. Tie Eli up in the storage alcove alone where he can be tended while others move supplies, or drag him with us through a narrower, increasingly unstable corridor that might collapse completely. Mara looks at him and then at the rope. Her hands shake. She chooses the rope. We lash him up, but as we do, the wall caves again, heavier, angrier, and a pressure wave knocks the tarp shut, pinning Mace inside and slamming our fingers in a trap of coal. The tunnel screams like a living thing. The generator flares and dies with a final cough. The emergency bulbs gutter out, and we are reduced to headlamps and the flame of a single burner someone holds like a defiant star. Dust settles. The silence after is worse than the noise. In that oppressive quiet, Mace's breathing is thin, and the tarp flutters like a moth wing pinned to the world. We dig frantically with bare hands and spades until fingers bleed and knuckles white with frost, and the world feels like a memory someone is trying to erase. When we finally peel back the tarp, Mace is still breathing, eyes wide and glazed, whispering the same strange sentence. They made it snow. He smiles, a hollow thing that frightens everyone because it's the smile of someone who thinks the joke was worth it. Juno looks at the heater's scorched metal like a crime scene, and she says quietly, "The storm is not natural." The revelation is both a key and a lock. If someone engineered this, then maybe somewhere there's a control room, a set of people with instruments and intentions. Or maybe it was 100 people with desperate ideas, each one adding chaos to the mountain. Either way, the world is no longer an arbitrary harvest of misery. It is a quilt of human mistakes, stitched in panic, warmed by machines that thought themselves gods. We brace for worse, The harrower, a thing made of metal and desperation, keeps moving. Its echo crawls up the vents. Above ground, men may be fighting the storm with boilers and blowers. Down here, we are counting cans and praying to keep the wrong kind of heat from killing us. The rules that kept us alive are fraying because the enemy is not only the cold or the dead, but a new kind of human hubris. And when the radio crackles, a voice reads a bulletin in a tone that pretends authority. Evacuation protocols are suspended. Thermal mitigation in progress. Remain sheltered. The words are so official sounding they make your stomach sick. Bureaucracy in a world that doesn't deserve it. But the frequency is old and the signal is faint. Someone is out there, trying to organize salvation through a speaker system that shivers with snow. Are they friends? Are they the ones with the heaters? The line between deliverer and destroyer narrows into a thin, dangerous path we might have to walk. We strap on our packs because inertia is a better plan than waiting for clarity. The rules we have, strange, cruel, kind, are our map now. We move because we must. We listen for the harrower's footfalls and the mountain's groan, and for other voices on the radio that might tell us whether to trust the heat or run from it. The world above is trying to be warmed into obedience, but sometimes comfort comes with a cost measured in collapses. Sometimes people who mend a thing break something else. The last stretch felt like being pulled through the throat of the mountain. Every footstep was a promise and a threat. Each scrape of metal a reminder that the world could decide to stop having mercy at any second. We moved as a single organism. Juno scanning the ceiling and walls. Toby humming jokes that nobody wanted but everyone needed. Mara muttering inventory lists under her breath like prayer. Eli limping and gritting his teeth, and me carrying the radio like a compass and a confession. Mace shuffled in the tarp behind us, his eyes half closed, fever making him small and old in ways that had nothing to do with time. The map Juno clutched had become more ceremonial than useful. Ink lines crossed by the real geography of collapse. But it still mattered because it gave people something to hold on to besides fear. We kept to the mapped hallways where we could, and when the mountain threatened to swallow those, we crawled through service ducts and maintenance shafts like the world's most reluctant spelunkers. The harrower's echo threaded through everything now, like a second heartbeat we couldn't locate. It was metal when you heard it close up, human desperation when you heard it far off, and madness when you tried to think about how many people had fed fuel and prayers into its belly. At one choke point, the ceiling shuddered and a shower of ice fell, sharp as teeth. Dust and grit filled the air. My contact lenses fogged over and became useless slits. Juno dropped, pressing my shoulder down with a hand that was all urgency. "Stay low," she hissed. You could see the mountain moving, a slow, imperceptible animal adjusting its weight. The sound was a low, wet groan that urged the blood in my ears to pound. We squeezed through a gap the width of a coffin and came out into a maintenance corridor that smelled of burnt wiring and old coffee. Someone had left a mug, half full and frozen on the edge, as if they'd meant to come back. That's the cruelty of scavenging, the little betrayals of everyday life. The world above leaves you traces of ordinary decisions. A cereal box, a child's shoe, a coffee cup with lipstick on the rim. You imagine the moment before, the person who took that sip, distracted, thinking they had time. All the small pauses that become final are what haunt you down here. Eli's ankle throbbed with the sort of pain that announces itself internally and refuses to be ignored. We tried to keep his spirits high with jokes and stupid bets on who could find the next can of beans first. His laugh was thin but real. That laugh kept us from turning him into the ledger of probability, the unfortunate equation that the math of survival sometimes demands. We bind the injured, we carry the sick, we don't leave unless leaving is a mercy. Those are the rules that had teeth. The route up narrowed to a ladder that smelled of oil and old rust. Someone, some ghost with priorities and courage or terrible planning, had stockpiled a set of rungs that led to a maintenance hatch. It was our stairway to the surface, a promise of wind and open sky. We climbed one at a time because physics and superstition both demand patience when you are dangling between life and being crushed under a glacier of indifference. When the hatch opened, it didn't give us sunlight so much as a sharpened white that stabbed the eyes. Sunlight is a liar. It can be blinding and honest at the same time. For a moment, the world above seemed almost beautiful in a ridiculous, terrible way. The city skeletons poked up, through drifts like broken teeth in a smile that had lost interest in kindness. Snow moved in waves across the ruins like an ocean trying to cover a shameful deed. Wind hit us and bit, 1,000 razors against exposed skin. You learn to love the bite because it proves you're awake. We stood, wrapped in our rags and scavenged coats, staring at a ruined skyline that had been living under a dress of ice and white for so long that its bones had grown brittle. There were other shapes out there. People, maybe, hunched and distant. Fires that looked like embers but were likely traps. And, at the far edge, a silhouette that didn't belong to the randomness of ruins. Something like a tower of metal with panels and loudspeakers, and near it, smaller figures moving with purpose. Radios flared in my pack like a nervous animal. Juno held up a hand. We froze. The humans out there had organized one way or another. That was the terrifying part. Organization after apocalypse means somebody still believes they can impose a plan on chaos. It can mean salvation. Or it can mean someone else's blueprint for how the world should be remade, with you as a piece in the machine. We huddled, making silent lists. The harrower could be there. The people with the big heaters could be there. Or it could be a community with clean hands and terrible history. We had learned not to trust the shape of help. Toby's breath steamed in front of him. Maybe they have coffee, he whispered, and every laughter reflex in us twitched. Humor fails into silence sometimes because the joke isn't worth the risk. But he kept up the refrain like a talisman. Coffee, coffee, coffee. And somewhere between the joke and the need, it felt like normalcy, carved a hollow in our chest. We made a plan with the slimmest margin of optimism. Approach unseen, listen, and if signals sounded like organization rather than coercion, try to trade. If the tone had the coldness of command, back away and find another route. Rules, Juno said, don't change. They adapt. The old rules had evolved into something like ritual. Keep the radio on low, move as a pack, never split beyond sight, always leave a tracer. Our tracer was a small strip of reflective tape on a grate. It seemed trivial until a gust of cutting wind threatened to take our horizon away. We skulked along the braided gutters, using ruined air vents as cover, crawling across rooftops with boots that found purchase on jagged ice. The cold ate through the seams of our clothing. It took fingers first, and then patience. The city around us was a tableau of decisions people once made in bright rooms that now looked stupid and small and irrelevant. A billboard read, "Sell," in bigger letters than the city deserves, frozen into a time before survival. When we finally got within earshot, it was not the harrower's roar or the cold efficiency of an organized camp that met us, but a voice, cracked and public, reading orders, and condolences with the mechanical cadence of someone trained to speak into a microphone. The message promised shelters and ration points and a kindness that sounded like a threat when spoken over loudspeakers. "Thermal mitigation in progress," the speaker said. "Do not approach heat sources unless authorized. Evacuation points are open." It was official enough to be dangerous. Officialdom expressed itself in the vacuum of panic as control. But we could smell the heat across the snow line, like a temptation. Smoke drifted from a cluster of contraptions that could have been heaters or bludgeons. People milled around them in bundles, faces obscured, not necessarily friendly. The harrower rumor made sense now in the form of these rigs. Industrial heaters, jury-rigged blowers, something designed to make a weather pattern bend. Mace's whisper. They made it snow. Returned in my head with new weight. If these people were riding the weather by flame, by force, then their hands were on the machinery of climate, and hands that work machines have to be trusted carefully. We moved like thieves, bargaining with fate. We approached from a ridge, careful to stay downwind. A pair of sentries noticed the headlamps and raised alarms, a quick, jagged sound that turned the world into a machine of suspicion. Figures in heavy coats rushed toward us, voices calling for identification. A harsh light washed the snow into a white so bright it hurt, and shadowy faces loomed like judges. They were organized, yes, but not immediately hostile. One of them held out a hand that looked less in the mood for violence than commerce. "State your purpose," he said, and it sounded rehearsed. "We're survivors," Juno answered, keeping her voice steady, the way she always did. "Medical aid, fuel, trade." Their leader, a woman with a bandana over her mouth and eyes like cracked flint, studied us. "You came up from the tunnels," she said. It wasn't a question. The mitigation teams asked that no one approach the rigs. It's dangerous. "You're the mitigation teams?" I asked, and even in my own ears the hope in my voice felt dangerous. She hesitated, and in that half-second 1,000 tiny tragedies unspooled behind her. "We tried to heal the sky," she said finally. "We thought we could melt the drift that was crushing the city. We were wrong. But we can stabilize pockets. We can make zones that are not death. We provide heat, food, shelter, but we have to control it, for everyone's safety." Control is the polite word for power in a ruined world. Her tentacles of authority were wrapped in a benevolent message. "We will give you warmth if you follow instructions." The offer was a table with a single seat and no guarantee the chair wouldn't fold. Mace, who had staggered up with us like an accusation and an apology, looked at the woman and then at the rigs. His eyes lost their fever glaze for a second and hardened as if remembering. He muttered, almost to himself, "They were right to try. They were wrong in the way that kills." The leader's gaze flicked to him. "You're hurt," she said softer. "We have medics. We can help." Mara's hand tightened on the pack strap. "What is the cost?" she asked, and the question held the shape of negotiation. Food is rarely free. Safety is never gratis. The woman's answer was thin as a ration bar. "Join us. Work the mitigators. Help keep the rigs running. In return, you eat and sleep in a shelter with warmth. Work for safety. Work for survival. The old school deal. Sweat now, maybe live later." Juno stepped forward, the map crinkling under her gloved hand like a relic. "And the harrower?" she asked. The woman's expression changed. A small, miserable thing. We called it the harrower because it did what harrows do. It stirred things up. It's not just one machine. It's every old furnace and tricked blower we burned to save ourselves. Sometimes it stabilizes. Sometimes it moves the snow like a tide. We're trying to learn it. The language of trying sounded like the language of repair. But we had seen what trying had done. Exploded vents, shifted pressure, killed corridors. The cost of their experimentation likely included the bones of people who learned too late. It came down to a ledger again, written on the guts and spirits of people. Join and trade labor for warmth, or stay independent and risk the mountain's next mood. The mitigation group's logic had a clinical cruelty. Save some now by experimenting on the rest. In the flickering light of the rigs, their faces looked both steely and weary. The leader's hands were calloused, precise. She offered us a ration packet like a bribe. Toby, who had been strangely silent, stepped forward before any of us could think to stop him. He took the packet with both hands like a confession. "We'll help," he said, voice low. "For now. But we keep our rules." His humor had thinned into something fierce. "We teach someone not to burn too hot. We keep the radios open. We don't become the thing that makes the snow listen." The leader studied us as if weighing the weight of fatigue and hope in her palm. After a long minute, she nodded. "You have 2 days to prove yourselves," she said. "Work a shift on the blowers. Learn the schedule. Then we'll decide." 2 days. 2 days to prove your loyalty to a system that assumed authority. 2 days to show you aren't a risk. 2 days to be eaten by patience or saved by it. We accepted because we were pragmatic, and because the cold outside had an appetite that you can't reason with. That night, sleeping in the rough shelter, I broadcast into the radio one more time. The microphones picked up the roar of the rigs and the distant howl of the city winds. I spoke softly, not a report but a confession, a ledger for whoever might be listening. "We made a bargain," I said into the static. "We traded rules for warmth. We keep our strange rules as best we can. We hope that the people who tried to save the sky learned something beyond the arrogance that broke it." Mace slept with a face that looked less hollow and more honest. Eli's ankle throbbed, but he was breathing. Juno's hands cradled the map as if it were not a map at all, but a small set of bones that told how to survive. Outside, the harrower hummed, and sometimes sneezed like a coughing god. The glorious, terrible snow listened and shifted, reacting to heat and human will with a mind that felt almost alive. We had stepped into the middle of a conversation between weather and people, and the words being traded were dangerous. The final twist, that last soft cruelty the mountain saved for us, came in radio form at dawn. A frequency we'd been monitoring for weeks crackled alive with a voice that made the hair on my neck rise. It wasn't the mitigation leader, nor our old emergency net. It was a calm, mechanical voice, a bulletin that sounded like it had been recorded and looped for when people needed to hear something authoritative. "Attention, survivors," it said. "Mitigation protocols require mandatory consolidation. Evacuation to thermal zones will begin immediately. Non-compliant groups will be considered a hazard to public safety." The words were polite and precise, the kind of language designed to feed obedience. The mountain seemed to listen. Snow shifted on the horizon in a slow, deliberate way that made my teeth ache. The mitigation leader paled, cursing under her breath. "They're calling for consolidation," she said. "They think containment will help. That voice, it's not coming from us." We looked at one another. 2 days of proving ourselves, a promise of heat, and now the net closing with a bureaucratic hand. The radio continued, flat and unblinking. Report to the assembly points. We will provide transit. What if it's a trap? Mara asked, voice thin. Her question was a knife. Or what if it's the only way out? Juno replied, voice steadier than I felt. The mountain gave a low sound, and the snow at the horizon rolled like an answering tide. We had come hoping to change our fortune. Instead, we had stepped onto a stage in someone else's play. The choice was not heroics, but small mercies. Obey and risk becoming part of a system that might devour you, or refuse and remain a brittle island hoping the mountain spares you. I turned the radio off for a moment and listened to the world. The wind sounded like 1,000 pages turning. The rigs hissed and coughed. In the distance, the metal tower sent its message and waited. We had our strange rules. They were more important than ever, because they would guide how we negotiated our surrender and our dignity. Toby picked at a frozen seam on his glove and made a joke about how we could negotiate for coffee. And, for a second, we all laughed because laughter is sometimes the only medicine that works. We had escaped the tunnels. We'd seen the face of organized mitigation. We'd traded labor for a chance at warmth. But the mountain wasn't done, and neither was the story. The radio's last message, that measured polite demand for consolidation, hung in the air like an edict, and none of us could say whether it was salvation or a new kind of prison. We moved toward the assembly point the next morning, because that is how stories continue, by making a choice and then walking until the consequences meet you. I clipped the radio to my belt and whispered into the mic as we walked, a whisper more for myself than for anyone else. We have strange rules. We'll hold them. And if the snow listens, we'll learn to speak back. We set out at first light, though light is a slippery concept in a world that had been buried under snow for months. The sky was a pallid gray, stretching endless and indifferent above the fractured city. Each step we took crunched through crusted layers of frost, our boots sinking unexpectedly into hidden pockets of powder, the sound sharp, brittle, and strangely loud in the quiet morning. We moved as one, our pack a singular mass of breaths, boots, and anxious murmurs, the radio humming faintly at my hip. Even the static seemed conscious, tuning itself to the rhythm of the world, waiting to warn us of trouble before it arrived. The assembly point was a half-mile away, and the walk felt longer than it should have. Buildings leaned precariously, walls cracked open like spilled sugar, revealing furniture frozen mid-life. A chair tipped over, a child's toy frozen into the snow, a calendar from months ago marking the world that had vanished. These glimpses of the old life pressed on the chest like a weight that wasn't snow. You could feel the absence of warmth, of laughter, of ordinary mistakes. It was a ghostly audience watching our every move, and it made the silence oppressive. Juno led, her eyes scanning every shadow. Her shoulders were tense, as if the weight of responsibility wasn't just for us, but for all the voices trapped under the snow, for all the people who would never reach this assembly point. Mace followed, keeping an arm near Eli, whose ankle had stiffened overnight, a subtle reminder that our survival was always uneven, fragile. Mara trailed with the map, tracing lines in the frost with a gloved finger, as if she could redraw the world into something safer. Toby was last, muttering nonsense under his breath to fill the gaps in fear with the comfort of absurdity, and sometimes even managing a laugh that felt absurdly human. The assembly point was marked by flares and taut ropes, Snow-blasted flags marking boundaries in a landscape where boundaries had almost ceased to exist. There were other people here, figures moving methodically, some carrying makeshift shields of scrap metal, others dragging sleds of supplies. Their faces were scarred by frostbite and fatigue, and their eyes darted constantly, reading the environment as if it were a hostile text. They did not speak. Words were too risky here. We weren't sure whether to approach cautiously or charge forward with desperate hope. The mitigation team's rules had been vague but non-negotiable. Move to assembly, work shifts, survive by following orders. A metallic clanging sounded somewhere to the east, sharp and sudden, and we all froze. The sound ricocheted off ice-crusted walls and empty streets, carrying an immediate threat. Toby swore quietly, the expletive hanging in the air like smoke. Juno gestured for silence and crouched low, scanning the horizon with the practiced vigilance of someone who had long ago internalized fear. "Probably a structural collapse," she whispered, though the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. It could be machinery or worse. Another survivor, desperate and armed, seeking territory or food. We advanced slowly, each step deliberate. The snow here wasn't uniform. It shifted unpredictably, hiding holes and fragile surfaces beneath a deceptive smoothness. I stumbled once, my hands clawing at the icy crust to stop a fall that could have snapped bones. The sound of my heart pounding was loud in my ears, matching the cold that seemed to seep into the marrow. Mara helped me regain balance, her gloved hand firm, the touch grounding. We moved forward, a thread of life weaving through a world of decay. As we neared the assembly point proper, the organized chaos revealed itself. There were tents of reinforced plastic and salvaged metal, some smoking faintly to provide warmth. A few small fires flickered behind barriers, each surrounded by people taking turns shoveling snow to prevent collapse. The heat was sparse, fragile, but it was a beacon in the endless whiteness. We paused at the edge, evaluating. The mitigation leader had warned us about strict schedules and the consequences of disobedience. Every mistake here could be deadly. A young man approached, carrying a clipboard made from a cardboard panel and duct tape. His voice was rough, the timbre of someone who had shouted over machines and storms for a long time. "New arrivals?" he asked. It wasn't really a question, it was an inspection, a verification of our right to occupy this fragile sanctuary. Juno nodded, stepping forward, the map still clutched in her hands. "From the tunnels," she said. 2 days ago, sent by the mitigation leader." The man's eyes flicked over us, assessing, calculating. Then he gestured toward a line of tents. Medical, food distribution, and then workstations. First, orientation. Learn the schedule. Follow it. No exceptions. He paused, his gaze lingering on Eli's ankle. Medical tent, then assignment. Do not wander. Do not speak out of turn. His words were clipped, dangerous in their precision. We nodded, internalizing every nuance as if our lives depended on it, because they did. Inside the orientation tent, a projector flickered weakly, displaying diagrams of heat distribution, blower mechanisms, and safety protocols. The images were technical, precise, and terrifying in their implications. Every blower, every rig, every improvised heater was a potential death trap. Failure to follow procedure, a voice intoned from a recording, will result in immediate termination of assignment and possible exclusion from thermal zones. The words were cold, mechanical, yet weighted with real consequences. We were being indoctrinated in survival, one rule at a time. Our first shift came quickly. The blower rigs were massive, haphazardly constructed assemblages of metal, wire, and heat exchangers, each one humming with dangerous energy. Juno instructed us on safety protocols while a veteran worker monitored our every move. The air was hot and heavy, filled with the scent of burning fuel and melted snow. Each adjustment to the machinery required precision. One wrong lever could flood the assembly point with scalding steam or trigger a mechanical collapse. Eli's limp was a constant worry, slowing us down just enough for mistakes to be plausible. Mace took on heavier tasks, dragging coils of cable and adjusting fans, his face pale but determined. Mara kept notes and monitored gauges, her handwriting nearly illegible but essential for our survival. Toby, naturally, found a way to joke about everything, pointing out absurd angles on conveyor belts and inventing names for malfunctioning vents. The humor was a fragile shield against terror, but it worked. For brief stretches, the oppressive weight lifted, and we felt human. Hours passed with relentless repetition. Sweat froze instantly on our skin, the hot air of the blowers colliding with the icy drafts sneaking through cracks in the structure. We worked mechanically, bodies moving in sync with the machines. Mistakes were minor but instructive. A valve turned the wrong way, a heat vent overheating a tent, a frozen pipe threatening to rupture. Each time, the veteran intervened, calm and precise, guiding us through errors without panic, his eyes flicking constantly for signs of fatigue or recklessness. By the end of the shift, exhaustion had seeped into our bones. Our hands were blistered, faces streaked with soot and frost, and muscles ached from movements both natural and forced. Yet somehow we survived intact. We had proved ourselves, or at least survived the proving. We returned to the shelter, huddled around a small sputtering fire. The warmth was precious and fragile, like a promise we weren't sure we fully trusted. We ate the ration packets, meager but satisfying after labor, the taste of canned meat and synthetic vitamins a reminder of human ingenuity and desperation. That night, lying in the shelter, the harrower's distant hum reached us again, low and resonant. Even the mitigation leader had seemed uneasy, glancing toward the horizon where the snow shifted unnaturally. Whispers circulated among workers about mechanical failures, odd readings, and sudden shifts in snow density. The rumor had become almost tangible. The snow listened, responded, moved. It was a force we could not predict, and it reminded us that control was an illusion. In the quiet, we shared memories of the world before the collapse. Mara spoke of her brother, lost to an avalanche that had swallowed their town. Juno recounted nights spent in abandoned subways, listening to the echoes of the living and the dead. Toby's humor flitted between absurd and poignant, a reminder that laughter could exist even when it felt impossible. Eli, silent most of the time, revealed fragments of his life as a medic, the moments when saving one person meant losing another. Mace, steady and grim, spoke little, letting the weight of his presence communicate volumes. Sleep came fitfully. Dreams were filled with collapsing corridors, snowdrifts rising like walls, and voices over static-filled radios calling out for help. The boundary between reality and nightmare blurred, each one feeding the other. When I awoke, the wind had shifted, carrying with it a smell of smoke and metal. The mitigation team was already moving, preparing for another shift, another test, another day of survival dictated by rules that seemed both strange and necessary. Our strange rules had adapted again. Move as a unit, obey the machines, respect the snow, and above all, survive. The mountain outside listened, the snow shifted, and the harrower's hum threaded through the day. Each decision we made, each lever we pulled, each valve we turned was a negotiation with the world, with survival, with morality. We had learned that survival was not just enduring, it was anticipating, responding, and sometimes bending the rules without breaking the fragile trust we had been granted. By the second day, a sense of rhythm emerged. We understood the patterns of the blowers, the schedules of ration distribution, the fleeting warmth of communal fires. Yet uncertainty lingered. The mitigation leader's instructions were precise but incomplete. The snow's behavior was unpredictable. The harrower's low, rolling hum never stopped. Every choice carried weight. Every misstep could cascade into catastrophe. And still we moved forward, step by step, lever by lever, breath by breath, bound together by circumstance and the fragile thread of hope that held us upright in a world that had almost stopped caring. As dusk approached, a sudden tremor ran through the assembly point. The largest blower shuddered violently, sparks flying from an exposed junction. Workers screamed and scrambled, and we rushed forward, instinct overtaking fear. Juno shouted instructions, and we followed, patching connections, rerouting heat, preventing disaster. The tremor subsided, but the lesson was clear. Control was temporary, survival was immediate, and the mountain's memory was long. Later, in the shelter, I switched the radio back on. The static was comforting now, a constant companion. I broadcast a brief message. We survived the shift, the snow listens, the machines hum, and we are still here. Rules adapt, and so do we. The words were a confession, a record, a prayer. Outside, the snow drifted, the wind whispered, and the harrower's echo continued to remind us that the world demanded vigilance, ingenuity, and courage. We had survived, but the mountain had not yet finished speaking. Each day was a negotiation with survival, and the story, like the snow, was far from over.